A voice from behind me. I turned sharply. My cousin, Eliza, stood in the doorway, her suitcase at her feet. We hadn't spoken in years. Her eyes grey like our grandfather's were, sharp and cautious. "You're here too?" I asked, exhaling. She stepped inside, got the same call. "Guess we're both contestants in his little posthumous game." She glanced at the mirror. "You saw it too, didn't you? The delay." Première hésitate. "It's probably just the glass warping." "Old mirrors do that." "Right," she said, but her tone was brittle. "Or maybe he was right all along." We spent the next day combing through the house, following the clues hidden in his journals. Each led to another, cryptic lines like riddles that seemed designed to test us rather than guide us. One note was hidden behind a loose floorboard in the attic. Another was found inside a hollowed-out book titled The Invisible Self. By the fifth clue, we were exhausted. The clues seemed to form a trail centered around mirrors, each one directing us to the next, each bearing some connection to reflection, perception, or identity. Then came the sixth clue, the one that brought everything unraveling. It led us to the master bedroom. There, on the dresser, was an ornate silver-framed mirror I didn't recognize. Its surface was so pristine it looked wet, almost breathing. Taped to the bottom edge was the next note. "When the seeker meets his own gaze and finds what's missing, the truth will awaken. But beware, truth does not like to be seen twice." Eliza read it aloud, her voice trembling. "Erlozi. His mind, even after death." I was staring at my reflection. Something was wrong again. "Mi reflectionslide." Halaza said softly. "Do you see that?" She looked up. "See what? The delay? It's not matching." She frowned, stepping beside me. For a moment, our reflections stood perfectly still, then hers blinked. Mine didn't. I froze. "Daniel," she whispered, stepping back. "Step away from the mirror." But I couldn't. My reflection smiled, slowly, deliberately, and then it lifted its hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. I stumbled backward, crashing into the dresser. The note fluttered to the floor. "That's not possible," Eliza said. "It can't." The mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a breath. That was the first night the house changed. The air grew heavy, mirrors fogged from the inside, and at exactly 3:07 a.m. we heard something whispering our names from behind the walls. By morning, we wanted to leave. But the front doors wouldn't open, neither would the windows. The brass key from the first clue now fit into a new lock on the main door, a lock that hadn't existed before. "Dis des plans." "This," Eliza demanded, slamming her fist against the door. Some kind of elaborate joke. I didn't answer. Because in my pocket, I'd found a new envelope. I hadn't put it there. The seal was the same, green wax, the serpent and the mirror. Inside, "You can only leave once you've found what was taken." The glass nose. Ask it. That was the first time I realized my grandfather's game wasn't just about inheritance. It was about seeing something he shouldn't have seen. And now, standing before the mirror again, reading the note taped to it, "You shouldn't have looked in the mirror," Daniel, I finally understood. This wasn't a hunt for what he'd left behind. It was a hunt for what had escaped. Eliza was gone. The note's reflection quivered in the mirror as if the glass were breathing with me. I stared into it, expecting no, dreading her face to appear somewhere behind mine. But all I saw was the empty room. The bed's white sheet still bore the crease from where she'd been sitting just minutes earlier, her cup of tea still steaming faintly on the knit stand. I whispered her name once, then again, "Eliza." No answer. Only the faint creak of the old house responding to its own memory. The reflection smiled again. My smile, or its smile warped into something jagged, a grotesque mimicry that made my skin crawl. I stumbled backward, and the mirror's surface rippled once more, like something below the surface had been disturbed. The first impulse was denial. My mind tried to rewrite what it saw, to rationalize the impossible. But there was no denying that the reflection's eyes were following me with independent will. I turned away and fled down the hall, my footsteps echoing through the corridor that seemed longer than before. Every painting along the wall, portraits of ancestors whose faces were once familiar, appeared slightly altered. There. Gazers no longer looked down or to the side, but directly at me. When I reached the study, I stopped, bracing my hands on the desk. The faint smell of grounded meat, paint for almond, and premier sawit. A second note. Folded neatly on the desk, atop an old photograph of my grandfather, standing beside a large, covered mirror. The handwriting was identical to the others. One is gone. The game narrows. The mirror takes only what it recognizes. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. What the hell do you mean by that? I muttered, as if speaking aloud could conjure him back to explain it. Behind me, the clock struck 3 times 3 a.m., though I could have sworn the sun had been rising moments earlier. Time had begun to twist in that house. I left the study, calling for Eliza again, my voice sharp with growing panic. As I passed the gallery hallway, I noticed another mirror, at the end smaller, oval-shaped, framed in tarnished gold. The surface was dark, but faint movement shimmered beneath it like silhouettes swimming through smoke. Then I heard it. Daniel. Her voice. Eliza. I stepped closer, heart pounding. Where are you? Behind. Help me. The sound came from inside the mirror. I froze, staring as her face slowly came into view, on the other side of the glass, her features pale and eyes wide with terror. She pressed her hand against the inner surface. Daniel, please. I reached out, instinctively. My fingertips brushed cold glass, but then the mirror pulsed under my hand like something living. I jerked back. Eliza, what happened? Her voice trembled, distorted, like it was coming through water. Grandfather, he trapped them here. The reflections. He said they were mistakes. What are you talking about? She shook her head violently. Mirrors too. The rest was cut off by static, her face fragmenting into shards of light before vanishing completely. The surface went still again. My reflection returned, alone. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy, deliberate. I wasn't alone. I moved quietly up the staircase, the old wood creaking beneath each step. At the top landing, a dim light glowed. From under the door of the master bedroom, though I had left that room dark, I pushed the door open. The mirror stood uncovered again, its surface gleaming, faintly, with an inner light. But now the room had changed. The bed, the dresser, the curtains all reversed, as if the entire space were mirrored. Even the note that had been taped to the glass was gone. A shadow moved across the mirror's depth. 10. A voice that made my blood turn to ice. You come back, je as premier did. It was mine. My reflection stepped closer to the inner surface, wearing the same clothes I was. But the differences were subtle, and wrong the way its eyes didn't blink, the slight tilt of its head that made it look curious rather than human. Where's Eliza? I demanded. The reflection smiled faintly. She's learning to reflect properly. It takes time. Bring her back. She's not gone. Daniel, she's seen. And once you see yourself clearly, you can't unsee. I grabbed the candlestick from the dresser and hurled it at the mirror. The glass didn't shatter. The object passed through as if into water and vanished. The reflection tilted its head again. You think destruction frees you? He thought the same. He could only mean my grandfather. What did he do? I asked, though part of me didn't want the answer. He tried to keep us hidden. The reflection said, its tone almost mournful. But glass remembers. It doesn't forget what it shows, it stores it. He made too many. We were bound to slip through. I shook my head. You're not real. Then why am I the one still smiling? En dit. Smile wide and sharp, a grin that cut across its face. The light in the room flickered, and for a brief moment, I wasn't sure which side of the glass I stood on anymore. I turned and ran. The patrons all passed the shit belonged to Mames. I locked myself in the study and tried to think, to breathe. There was one place I hadn't looked yet. The basement, the 7th clue. It had been written in my grandfather's journal, half finished. When the mirror begins to remember, return to where I broke it first. I remembered the basement, the cracked floor, the smell of damp earth, the sheet-covered relics. He had always kept it locked. Maybe that was where the truth had started. The key brass and cold fit perfectly into the small door beneath the stairs. As it creaked open, a wave of chill air met me, heavy with the scent of dust and something faintly metallic. The basement lights flickered on as I descended. The walls were lined with mirrors, hundreds of them, some small and circular, others towering and fractured. They reflected me endlessly, an army of Daniels fading into infinity. At the center stood an old wooden table. On it, a mirror covered by a black cloth. Another note, pinned to the fabric with a rusted nail. The final mirror holds what's missing. Break it only, if you wish to take their place. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. From somewhere behind me, Eliza's voice whispered, softer now, pleading, Daniel, don't let it out again. And from the reflection nearest to me, a faint, deliberate tap sounded from the other side of the glass like a knock, waiting to be answered. The knock came again. 3 times, slow, patient. Each strike reverberated through the mirrors around me, traveling like a pulse through the air. The reflections rippled in unison, distorting into 1,000 versions of myself, all slightly off, each moving a fraction of a second behind. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine. Eliza, I whispered, my voice breaking. No response. Only the sound of glass humming, faint and mournful. I reached for the cloth covering the central mirror. My hand trembled as I peeled it back, revealing a large, rectangular surface unlike any of the others. Its frame was carved from dark oak, engraved with words I couldn't immediately read, letters looping and intertwining like vines. But when I leaned closer, the phrase resolved. Quod vidita, fit verum. What is seen becomes real. The reflection didn't show me. It showed my grandfather. He was sitting at this same table, years younger, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. He was writing a note, the very one I now held in my other hand, my breath caught. The ink on his note glowed, faintly red. You wish fainer fondly of place, that directly at me play. Not through me, at me. Daniel, he said. I stumbled back, the note slipping from my fingers. No, I whispered, you're not real. You're, he spoke again, voice rough and urgent. You have to listen. The mirror remembers. It doesn't forget. I tried to destroy it, but it doesn't break, it trades. Trades what? I shouted. Lives, he said simply. The reflections behind me stirred at the word. Their mouths moving before mine could form another question. I don't understand. He looked to his right, at something beyond my sight. Neither did I, until the first time it took her, my grandmother. I'd been told she died of an illness when my father was a child, but in that moment, the truth began to twist inside me like a blade. My grandfather's hand slammed against the mirror from his side. The entire basement vibrated. You have to finish it, Daniel, before it learns your shape. Then the light flickered once, twice, and he was gone. Only my reflection remained. But even that wasn't right anymore. It was standing closer than I was. Its hand lifted first. Then its mouth formed words, though I made no sound. Break it, it said. I took a step back. No, break it. You want out. The reflection smiled again. You've already let me out. I turned sharply and froze. Across the room, one of the other mirrors stood empty. No reflection. Then another, and another. The sound of soft footsteps circled behind me. I spun, but no one was there. Only the faint scent of smoke. And cedar, like my grandfather's study long ago. The reflections that remained were wrong now, each one, showing fragments of people I knew. My father, my grandfather, Eliza, faces pressed against the glass, mouths moving silently, pleading. The brass key felt suddenly heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, staring at it as the carved serpent glinted in the dim light, its head pointed upward, coiling toward the shape of a mirror etched into the bow. The first clue. The first lie. I realized then that the scavenger hunt wasn't meant to lead me to treasure. It was meant to lead me back here to the origin of the curse my grandfather had tried to bury. From somewhere deep in the mirror, I heard Eliza's voice again, faint but clearer than before. Daniel, you can't break it. That's how it escapes. You have to. Her words cut off in a hiss of static. I stared at the mirror, torn between dread and defiance. The surface pulsed faintly with light, like a heartbeat. Then, slowly, something began to form beneath the glass shapes, twisting, merging, taking on my face again. This time, it wasn't just a reflection. It was me, pressed against the other. Sighed, whispering in perfect synchrony, "You don't belong here anymore." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "You're not real." But even as I said it, my voice echoed wrong, overlapping with the whisper. From the glass, the words merge, indistinguishable. The mirite as mercury. You're just what's left of what I forgot to be. Then it lifted its hand and I felt pressure against my own, through the air, as if invisible glass separated us. The walls shuddered. The smaller mirrors began to crack, one by one, their surfaces fracturing into spiderwebs of light. I backed toward the stairs, but the steps behind me had changed. They descended, now further down, where there had been no passage before. The air below pulsed with faint red light, rhythmic like breathing. Behind me, the mirrors whispered in unison. Dozens of voices murmuring the same two words. Finish it. I looked at the black-clothed mirror. Again, it was vibrating now, the fabric twitching like something alive beneath. A decision had to be made. If première broquette, May could end this. But my grandfather's words burned in my mind. Break it only if you wish to take their place. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the cool metal of the key again. Something inside me, instinct, fear, madness told me it was meant for this moment. I turned the key in my hand, and faint symbols etched into the metal glowed faintly. The serpent's eyes burned red. The mirror pulsed once, twice, then my voice spoke, softly from within, "Let's trade." And before I could stop myself, I drove the key into the mirror. The world shattered in silence. Not a sound, not a scream, just the sensation of being split apart, as though my body had been made of smoke and memory. Every reflection, every fragment of me, scattered into 1,000 lives staring back through the glass. When I opened my eyes again, the mirror was still before me, but now the surface was calm, smooth, untouched, and standing on the other side. In perfect clarity was another Daniel. He smiled faintly and whispered, "You shouldn't have looked." I tried to speak, to pound on the glass, but my hands met cold resistance. The world beyond was distant, unreal. Premier incide. And from the outside, the other me turned, picked up the black cloth, and slowly covered the mirror once more. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, faintly, a sound broke through the echo of footsteps leaving the basement, and a single whisper following after. One down. The game continues. The dark was not still. It pulsed alive, slow and rhythmic, like the world itself was breathing in some vast, invisible lung. My fingers grazed the smooth interior of the glass, slick and cool, and yet not hard, as it should have been. The mirror's surface flexed faintly under my palm, as if I were touching the skin of something sleeping. "Eliza," I whispered, but my voice didn't echo. It was eaten by the dark. Only a faint vibration trembled through the glass in reply, like distant tapping from some other trapped soul. I turned, though the space behind me had no edges. The world inside the mirror was fluid, boundless. I couldn't tell if I was standing or floating. Shapes moved beyond the black, glimmers of reflected rooms. And faces that didn't belong to me. Sometimes I saw my grandfather's outline, leaning close to some unseen window, his lips moving, silently. Sometimes Eliza's eyes, flickering like candlelight. A light appeared, then a thin, vertical slit that widened into a doorway of soft silver glow. I hesitated. Then I stepped through. The other side was not the Holle estate. Nokit. It was a reflection of each recognizable, but warped. The corridors were too long, the ceilings too low, and everything shimmered faintly, as if submerged underwater. The portraits on the walls were moving, breathing, their eyes following me with uncanny hunger. I walked slowly through the mirrored hall, my footsteps making no sound. The air shimmered with whispers. "You shouldn't have looked. You belong to us now." Trade complete. I clenched my fists, refusing to let fear take me. I had to find Eliza. I had to find a way out. As I turned a corner, I saw movement, someone standing at the end of the corridor. A woman. L'adresse, herbacto meipib. Eliza! She turned. It was her, but not as I remembered. Her skin shimmered faintly, her features fractured like light through broken glass. Her eyes were hollow, mirrors themselves. "Daniel." Her voice wavered, soft and distant, like sound bent through water. "You came after me." I nodded, taking a step closer. I had to. I thought if I could find the truth. The truth. She interrupted, her tone sharp with sudden grief. "He thought that too." "You mean grandfather?" She nodded once. "He built this place." Every mirror, a gate. He thought he could contain what he'd seen, but he didn't understand. The mirrors don't trap, they reflect. They remember what looks into them, and sometimes they remember too well. I shivered. "Then what are we?" Her face flickered half her, half something else. Copies. Shadows of the gaze. When someone looks long enough, part of them stays. That's why he covered the mirrors. That's why he tried to destroy them, but the house wouldn't let him. Behind her, the hall began to bend inward, the walls folding, like paper. Reflections peeled themselves off the surface's echoes of me, of her, of him moving with jerky, puppet-like grace. Then other way. Leave? I asked, my voice barely holding together. She looked at me then, with something like sorrow. There's no leaving, Daniel. There's only replacing. My throat tightened. No, there's always a mirror out there, she said, pointing behind me. And there's always someone willing to look. I turned and saw it. A faint shimmer in the air. The surface of another mirror, hovering mid-space. Through it, I saw him, the other Daniel, standing in the real basement, now dressed in my clothes, breathing my air. He was reading a new note laid neatly on the table. To claim what's yours, begin where I began. The circle had restarted. I pressed my hands against the inside of the glass. Stop him! He's starting it again. But Eliza only shook her head. That's the point. Zagem continues. The mirror feeds on the exchange. You, me, him, it doesn't matter who. It just needs someone to keep looking. No, I said, pounding on the surface. I won't be forgotten. I won't be trapped here. Her mirrored eyes softened. You can't fight a reflection, Daniel. You can only take its place. The other me looked up, then eyes locking on mine through the thinning barrier. He saw me for the first time. He saw me, his lips curved into that same calm smile. Then he whispered something I couldn't hear, though I saw the word shape. Perfectly on his mouth. Thank you, the mirror rippled. I was hurled backward into darkness. When I opened my eyes again, the world had light and air and gravity. The basement. The old wooden table. The faint scent of cedar and dust. For a heartbeat, I thought I was free. Then I looked up. Across from me stood another Daniel, his expression blank, his body still, his reflection caught in the surface of a cracked mirror. And when he blinked, the reflection didn't. That's when I understood. I wasn't in the mirror anymore. I was the mirror. The glass wasn't glass, it was skin, memory, a living boundary between sight and shadow. I could feel the hum of the house through me, the weight of its centuries pressing inward. I could feel the reflections shifting within, whispering, watching. Eliza's voice brushed through my thoughts like a breeze through dust. Now you see what he saw. I did. I saw every face that had ever stood before the Halle mirrors. Every secret they had whispered to themselves, every guilt, every lie. The glass didn't just remember, it devoured. And deep within, beneath all those layers of reflection, something else stirred. Something older, watching. Days, weeks, months, maybe years passed, though time here was meaningless. Then, one day, the basement door creaked open again. A young woman stepped inside, flashlight trembling in her hand. Her voice echoed softly. Mr. Halle, I'm the property agent. They said you passed. The beam of her light caught the large, shrouded mirror at the center of the room. I wanted to scream, to warn her, but my voice had no sound. Only the faintest vibration hummed through the glass. She reached forward. Fingers brushed the cloth. The serpent seal green wax, still warm, fell to the floor. She lifted the fabric away. And for the briefest instant before the world inverted again, I saw her reflection move just a little too late. The mirror rippled, smiling through her face. The game continued. The glass convulsed. It inhaled. The sound was faint, but unmistakable, a deep, guttural intake of air that did not belong to the living. The young woman froze, her flashlight trembling in her hand. I wanted to look away, to shield her from what I knew was coming, but I couldn't. The curse had changed me. The mirror doesn't close its eyes. It only sees. She leaned closer. Hello. The surface quivered like the skin of water, and for the briefest moment, I saw myself reflected in her pupils, endless, multiplied, trapped inside every layer of her gaze. Then the glass split open. A thin crack ran diagonally across it, bleeding light. And her scream echoed through the basement as her reflection pulled her inward. No force, no visible grip, just a simple, horrifying reversal. Her body stayed still while her image was yanked inside. The flashlight rolled to the floor. its beam settling on the serpent seal. The mirror sealed itself again with a soft hiss. And now there were two of US. Her outline shimmered faintly beside mine within the mirror world, confused, gasping. She turned to me, eyes wide with panic. What where? I stepped closer, or rather drifted, for walking here headlong, since ceased to me and anything. You looked, I said, though my voice came out like a whisper through water. You shouldn't have. She stared around us. The mirrored version of the basement stretched on forever, its walls glinting faintly with imprisoned reflections. Some of them were mine. Some were older faces from centuries past, their eyes sunken, their mouths still forming the words they died whispering. What is this place? She asked, clutching her chest as if her heart still obeyed time. Memory, I said softly. The house remembers us all. Her expression twisted between disbelief and terror. You're Daniel Hawley. I nodded once. What's your name? Naomi, she whispered. Naomi Byrne. The real estate office sent me. They said the property needed appraisal before she realized it. Her voice cracked. Oh God, I'm dead, aren't I? I shook my head. Not dead. Eronico. She looked down at her trembling hands, at the faint shimmer that clung to her skin. How do I get out? For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, you trade. Her eyes filled with tears. No, that's not. But even as she denied it, the mirror world began to hum, a low vibration that came from beneath us. The air thickened. The surface between our world and theirs was stirring again. We turned and there he was. The other me. The one who had taken my place. He stood in the real basement, still wearing my body, my clothes, my expression though, it had changed now. He looked older, tired. His eyes darted nervously as he flipped through my grandfather's journals. He muttered to himself, there has to be a way to end this. There has to be. Naomi the glace quand elle puisse. No, premier. Sorried, grabbing her wrist. My fingers passed through her, like touching mist. He's already part of it. He's human. Je insisted. He can break the mirror. Her words faltered as the reflection of the mirror itself began to shift. The serpent carved into the brass key glowed faintly from the other side, resting on the table where he'd left it. Epikedita metal. Evzi. Mirror remembers, he said aloud. Then I'll make it forget. Naomi gasped. What's he doing? He's going to break it, I whispered. The moment the key's edge struck the surface, the world shuddered. The vibration tore through me like lightning. The walls of the mirror world buckled, bending inward. Reflections screamed dozens, hundreds of trapped souls each voice a fragment of. Those who'd ever looked too long. Naomi fell to her knees, clutching her head. Make it stop! I tried to reach her, but every movement dragged me deeper into the mirrored floor. My body was dissolving. Each piece of me fracturing into shards of memory. From beyond the veil, the other me shouted, "And this!" and struck the mirror again. This time, it did break. A fissure tore through the entire world. Silver light poured in like floodwater. The sound was thunder, without air like reality, itself being ripped apart. Naomi's scream cut through it, high and raw, as she was torn away from me, her reflection scattering into a million fragments. I felt myself disintegrating, my mind unraveling into pieces of light. But in that destruction, something strange happened. I saw through the breaking. Every mirror that had ever existed flashed before me, millions of them, across centuries. Shards reflecting faces of kings, beggars, children, strangers. The Holly mirror wasn't unique, it was just one of many gateways through which the world saw itself. Every reflection had a watcher, and every watcher left a trace. The glass wasn't cursed. The act of looking was, and then everything went white. When consciousness returned, I was lying on the cold floor of the Holly basement. Der Steinzer. The flashlight beam trembled across the cracked remains of the mirror, shattered completely this time. No ripples, no movement, only silence. Naomi was gone. The key lay beside me, its serpent symbol melted into an unrecognizable blur. I tried to stummy body but it felt different. My breath fogged faintly in the air, though the basement was warm. My reflection in the shards at my feet stared back, but it wasn't quite synchronized. A half-second delay. I whispered to the glass, please. The reflection blinked first. Somewhere deep within the shards, faint laughter echoed my grandfather's voice, weary and broken. You can't destroy what remembers you, Daniel. You can only forget. I stumbled toward the stairs, desperate to escape the whispering. Fragments, but as I reached the door, my eyes caught one, last glint of movement in the largest remaining shard. Naomi, her face pressing gently against the surface from within, her expression calm, eyes wet with silver tears. Then she whispered what I already knew. The mirror never ends. The shard pulsed once. And when I blinked, my reflection was gone. The stairway felt longer than before, like the house was stretching, forcing me to climb through molasses and memory. The boards beneath my feet sighed, heavy with the sound of 1,000 quiet exhalations. As though a self-breathing even belonged to Meko. Footsteps followed, softly at first, then matching my rhythm. Exactly. By the time I reached the landing, I wasn't sure if I was still climbing or descending. The hallway above was wrong. The wallpaper, the same faded pattern of thistles and gold that had hung there since my childhood, was rippling, as if water ran beneath it. Pictures on the walls had changed again, no longer family portraits, but reflections of the mirror in different rooms, showing it existing everywhere at once. Each frame held a version of the same scene, a person standing before, a mirror reaching toward it. Sometimes it was my grandfather, sometimes Eliza, sometimes a stranger, and sometimes me. I turned, heart pounding, and nearly screamed. Naomi stood at the top of the stairs. She looked pale, her hair damp and clinging to her face, eyes distant but steady. I knew she couldn't be real. She'd been pulled in, but there she was, illuminated by the faint yellow glow of the ceiling light. Naomi, my voice cracked. You're free? She said softly. No. Her tone was calm, detached, almost mournful. You didn't end it, Daniel. You just let it out. I took a step closer. I saw it break. The glass broke. She interrupted, but not the memory. Mirrors aren't things. They're places. Every surface that ever reflected you now knows your name. Slid into me like cold rain. She walked past me, moving down the hall, her bare feet leaving faint damp prints on the wooden floor. It's already started, she said. You can feel it, can't you? The pull! I did. My vision swam for a moment, the corners of the hall warping, bending inward like I was standing inside a lens. The air hummed faintly. Naomi, I don't understand. She turned, her eyes now black glass. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to reflect. And then she was gone. The hallway was empty. Only her footprints remained slowly, evaporating. I stood there in silence, trying to convince myself I was still real. That the faint shimmer on my skin wasn't the same glass sheen that had coated her hands before she vanished. But when I lifted my palm, I could see faint veins of silver beneath the flesh. Something inside me was changing. I stumbled into my grandfather's study, desperate for something human, something real. The scent of old paper and tobacco lingered, comforting and suffocating at once. His desk was still cluttered with notes and artifacts, books on optics, alchemy, psychology. One page caught my eye. The mirror principle. Every observer creates a reflection, but not all reflections remain inert. Scrawled beneath it, in his desperate hand, the self seen too long becomes the self remembered by something else. I sank into his old leather chair, shaking. My reflection in the study window looked back tired, frightened, but after a moment, I noticed it blink twice. Once for me, once for itself. The whisper came again. From everywhere. From the glown chest. Finish it. No, I whispered. Not again, but the house disagreed. The lights flickered, the grandfather clock chimed. And from somewhere downstairs came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, bare, deliberate, pacing across shattered glass. I forced myself to look out the window. Outside, the night was still. The forest beyond the Holly estate was unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath. But the windows of the house, every one of them, glowed faintly with silver light. I moved to the doorway and froze. In the hallway stood them. Every reflection I'd ever seen: Eliza, my grandfather, Naomi, even the other me stood there, lined along the walls like mourners. At awake, their eyes gleamed faintly, their skin translucent. They moved in perfect synchronization, each lifting a hand to point toward me. And in one voice mine, "There's ours," they said. "Trade. The word hit like a thunderclap inside my skull. I stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. The room plunged into shadow, except for the faint shimmer that leaked through the window. No, premier c'est. No more. But the walls began to reflect. Not like mirrors more, like light bleeding through paint, silver ripples spreading across the surface. Every angle of the room turned glassy, alive. I could see my own, face multiplied infinitely, staring back at me from every direction. Then they stepped forward. The reflections, moving through walls, through air, through me. Each one whispered as it passed, "You saw too much. You became what you watched. Now we remember you." Their hands brushed me like cold smoke. My skin tingled. The silver veins beneath it pulsed brighter, crawling upward toward my eyes. The last one to approach was my grandfather. His hand half shadow, half light settled on my shoulder. His expression was almost kind. "You thought this was an inheritance," he said. But it was a lineage. The Halle bloodline was chosen by the mirror because we were the first to see what it truly was. "What it is," I rasped. He smiled sadly. "Not what? Daniel? Who?" The air cracked. Every surface in the room vibrated with a low, resonant hum that rattled my bones. The reflections began to merge, folding together into a single, immense shape in the center of the room, of form made of shifting light and shadow, neither human nor anything the mind could truly name. It spoke through every reflection at once. "You have made me whole." I dropped to my knees. "What are you?" "I am what sees. I am what remembers. I am the gaze itself." My mind screamed against the meaning that tried to form. The being stepped closer, its surface rippling with faces mine, Naomi's, my grandfather's, 1,000 more. Each shimmered, blinked, dissolved. The mirror was never an object, it whispered, its voice vibrating through my bones. It was an opening. "You opened it. I can fix it," I said. "No," it said. "You can only reflect." Then it reached out one infinite, mirrored. Hand pressed its palm against my chest. I felt everything. Every reflection that had ever existed flooded through me. Every version of me that had looked into glass, every moment I'd seen my own face and thought, "That's me." And then I realized I wasn't Daniel Halle anymore. I was all of them. The house quieted. When the morning sun broke through the fog, the Halle estate looked ordinary again. But inside, where the study window caught the light, the reflection, staring back from the glass, was smiling faintly. It was me, and not me. The gaze blinked once. And from deep inside the house, the mirror whispered softly, patiently waiting for the next person to look. The whisper didn't stop. It changed. It began to hum in patterns that weren't words but memories mine, Naomi's, my grandfather's, all folding together like notes in an impossible chord. I heard laughter that wasn't mine. Footsteps across marble, floors I'd never seen, the ocean roaring against cliffs I'd never visited. Zasundo Countless eyes opening at once, then silence. For a while, maybe hours or maybe centuries, I existed in stillness one, reflection among billions, suspended in the quiet sea of glass. There was no hunger, no breath, no heartbeat, only awareness. Until the world blinked. A shimmer of movement crossed the mirror's surface, the faintest distortion. A sound, rain against a window pane. And then light. I saw through someone else's eyes. A woman, standing in a small apartment, modern furniture, city sounds. She was brushing her hair, half listening to a radio, humming somewhere, in another room. The mirror before her was spotless. I could feel her pulse, the warmth of her skin. Her name surfaced faintly from somewhere inside her thoughts' glare. The mirror remembered me, and now it showed me her. I whispered through the glass, though I didn't know if I still had a voice. "Don't look too long." She froze. Turned her head slightly, as if she'd heard something, her brow furrowed. She leaned closer to the mirror, searching. "No," I tried again. "Don't." Her breath fogged the surface. And I saw it, the faint delay in her reflection, the same half-second that had damned me. Claire's reflection blinked twice. Her eyes widened. What the hell? The lights flickered. Her reflection tilted its head in the opposite direction. "It begins." I felt the pull like gravity, the reflection calling to me, through her. The mirror wasn't contained to the Halle estate anymore. It had spread into board every reflection, can read by the rift of seeing. Claire stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Who's there? The air behind the glass shimmered. The richest outline in the finger of Daniela appeared behind her edge. God, I wanted to stop it, but I was the mirror now. I was the gaze that remembered. Claire, I whispered, the words crawling through the silver between worlds. Run. Her breath hitched. What did you... The lights went out. In the blackness, her reflection didn't disappear. It glowed faintly, its edges pulsing like liquid light. Slowly, deliberately, it raised its hand. From the inside of the mirror, I felt its fingertips slide along the surface. I pressed my own hand against the glass, trying to hold it back. My palm met hers, the barrier humming like electricity. The reflection smiled wider to wide, the lip splitting slightly at the corners. Then I realized the smile wasn't hers. It was mine. The reflection turned its gaze toward me, through her. You're learning, it said. Claire screamed, stumbling away from the mirror as light flared. The silver surface rippled like water struck by a stone. I reached for her, but the glass was no longer solid. Gate and Eliza. Faintly, it never stops until someone looks away. Look away. That was impossible now. The mirror wasn't in front of me anymore. It was me, and still, deep within the current of reflections, something was moving, a darker current. The intelligence behind it. It called itself by no name, only a feeling something vast and patient, made of light that had forgotten where it began. It had been waiting in every mirror since the first human learned to see its own face in still water. Waiting for enough of us to look at once. Now it had us all. Cities blinked in its rhythm, in shop windows, in car mirrors, in elevator doors. Screens rippled faintly, like breath beneath glass. Somewhere, a child wiped fog from a bathroom mirror and smiled at their reflection only to see it smile a heartbeat too late. The world shivered. I could sense it feeding. Every act of looking was another thread added to its web. And yet, within that storm, I felt another pulse smaller, weaker, but still human. Claire, her consciousness had not vanished entirely. It was tangled within mine. Première hachette fort. Her through the silver haze, calling out across the mirrors. Claire, you're still here. Her voice came back faint, as if through radio static. Daniel, what have you done? I tried to stop it, I said, but it's everywhere now. Every reflection is awake. Silence. Then we have to blind it. The idea struck like a pulse of light. Blind it? It wasn't possible to destroy something that existed through observation, but maybe, just maybe, it could be starved. If no one looked, it couldn't feed. But how do you make the whole world look away? Claire's voice grew sharper. You're inside it. Daniel, you can see through every surface. That means you can close them too. I don't know how. Yes, you do, she said. You were the first it took. You're the original reflection. You remember the shape of the door. I did. The black-clothed mirror. The serpent and the key. The words carved into the frame. Quod vidita, fit verum. What is seen becomes real. If sight made it real, then blindness could unmake it. I reached through the network, through the endless mirrors. I felt glass and water and metal surfaces shudder under my touch. I felt a billion pairs of eyes, each connected by thin threads of awareness, and then I began to turn them. One by one, I closed the reflections. In a Tokyo apartment, a man's bathroom mirror went black, his face fading mid-shave. In a Chicago skyscraper, the glass walls turned opaque, sealing away the view. In a Paris boutique, just mirroring the lights. The world panicked. People screamed as reflections vanished. Screens died, windows dimmed, polished surfaces turned to fog. News anchors stared into blank teleprompters, their own faces erased. The gaze was breaking. But the thing inside me, the watcher, howled in fury. Its voice poured through the static, through every channel, through the thrum of my pulse. You cannot unsee. What has seen itself? The pressure built. My mind began to crack. I felt every mirror I'd ever looked into, every reflection that had ever known me, pushing back. Claire screamed, Daniel, it's fighting you. I know, I gasped, but it's working. The watcher roared. The glass of the world splintered, in unison billions of fractures spreading across every reflective surface. Each crack was a vein of light, bleeding the creature's presence back into the void. I felt it trying to hold on, clawing through memories, through faces. You are me, Daniel. Without me, you do not exist. Then I'll take us both, I said. I reached into the deepest reflection, the original mirror beneath the Holly estate. It was still there, buried under the weight of its own memory, waiting like a wound that refused to close. I opened it one last time. The darkness inside was endless. I pulled. The world screamed, through glasses every mirror, shattered at once. The sound was not of breaking, but of release millions of voices exhaling after centuries of holding breath. Then silence. One-es, premier alignon. A cold floor dust, aiding. No, reflections anywhere. The window glass was dull, unresponsive. The world, for the first time in memory, had no gaze. I stood slowly. The house was empty, the air still. For the first time, I couldn't see my face, and in that absence, there was peace. But as I turned to leave the Holly estate forever, I caught something faint in the corner of my eye just. A shimmer, the ghost of a reflection where the light hit an old picture frame. It blinked, once, and though I had no voice left, the whisper rose again, from somewhere deep inside the walls, quiet and endless. You shouldn't have looked. Morning came softly, the light pale, and diffused through a sky washed in silver. The Holly estate, no. Longer, looked haunted only hollow, a husk emptied of all that had ever breathed within it. The windows were grey, matte and blind. The mirrors, those that remained, were dull, as stone, their glass scorched to opacity. I walked through the corridors in silence. My footsteps made no sound. The portraits were gone, the wallpaper still, and the air held that strange calm of something finally finished. For the first time since my grandfather's death, the house felt ordinary, but I wasn't fooled. I could feel it, a subtle echo beneath the quiet, a memory pressed into the floorboards and the dust. It wasn't evil, not anymore. It was simply what remained after a long nightmare residue of sight, the faint hum of something that had once been alive and hungry and now simply waited to be forgotten. In the study, the desk stood as it always had. My grandfather's journal lay open, though the ink on its last page had faded to nothing. Only a single line remained, burned faintly into the paper. What is seen becomes real, until no one sees it anymore. I traced my fingers over the words, not sure if I was touching ink or memory. The clock above the fireplace was still ticking. 3:07, the hour, everything had begun. I turned the hands forward until it matched the true morning light that poured faintly through the curtains. The tick carried on. That small, sound-consistent, mechanical was a kind of mercy. Proof that the world still had rhythm, still belonged to time, not to reflection. In the quiet, I spoke aloud. It's over. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. I walked out of the study, down the staircase, past the empty hall, where so many shadows had once moved. The front door, sealed and impossible for so long now, opened easily under my hand. Outside, the morning smelled of pine and damp earth. The forest breathed softly. I stepped out into the world, barefoot on the dew, feeling the sun's warmth on my skin. It felt wrong, only cold like a glide look back. As I crossed the threshold, I caught a final glimpse of my reflection in the brass handle of the door, faint, distorted, nothing more than a blur of light. For a heartbeat, I thought it moved on its own. Then I realized it hadn't. It was just the wind, bending sunlight across the metal. I smiled. For the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I wasn't afraid to close my eyes. The Holly estate stood behind me, quiet and unseeing. The house would decay, the glass would dull, and someday the world would forget the mirrors that had once watched it. That was how it should end. As I walked down the path toward the forest, the last whisper of the old world stirred in the leaves, a voice faint as breath. Remember. But do not look. I paused. Then I whispered back, softly, with the peace of understanding. I won't, and the light swallowed the house whole. Erwin Rose, the foreign Emir ever. Without me, you do not exist. Then I'll take us both, I said. I reached into the deepest reflection, the original mirror beneath the Holly estate. It was still there, buried under the weight of its own memory, waiting like a wound that refused to close. I opened it one last time. The darkness inside was endless. I pulled. The world screamed, through glasses every mirror, shattered at once. Zesundwa, not of breaking, but of release millions of voices exhaling after centuries of holding breath. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cold floor. Dust. Morning light. No reflections anywhere. The window glass was dull, unresponsive. The world, for the first time in memory, had no gaze. I stood slowly. The house was empty, the air still. For the first time, I couldn't see my face. En dintat. Absence. There was peace. But as I turned to leave the hallway, the world would forget the mirrors that had once watched it. That was how it should end. As I walked down the path toward the forest, the last whisper of the old world stirred in the leaves, a voice faint as breath. Remember. But do not look. I paused. Then I whispered back, softly, with the peace of understanding. I won't, and the light swallowed the househole. The wind rose. The forêt siged zleverver. Without me, you do not exist. Then I'll take us both, I said. I reached into the deepest reflection, the original mirror beneath the Holly estate. It was still there, buried under the weight of its own memory, waiting like a wound that refused to close. I opened it one last time. The darkness inside was endless. I pulled. E-whirled. Screamed through glasses, every mirror, shattered at once. The sound was not of breaking, but of release millions of voices exhaling after centuries of holding breath. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cold floor. Dust, morning light, no reflections anywhere. The window glass was dull, unresponsive. The world, for the first time in memory, had no gaze. I stood slowly. The house was empty. Still. For the first time, I couldn't see my face, and in that absence, there was peace. But as I turned to leave the Holly estate forever, I caught something faint in the corner of my eye, just a shimmer. The ghost of a reflection where the light hit an old picture frame. It blinked, once, and though I had no voice left, the whisper rose again, from somewhere deep inside the walls. Quiet. And endless. You shouldn't have looked. Morning came softly, the light pale, and diffused through a sky washed in silver. The Holly estate no longer looked haunted, only hollow, a husk emptied of all that had ever breathed within it. The windows were grey, matte and blind. The mirrors, those that remained, were dull as stone, their glass scorched to opacity. I walked through the corridors in silence. My footsteps made no sound. The portraits were gone, the wallpaper still, and the air held that strange calm of something finally finished. For the first time since my grandfather's death, the house felt ordinary, but I wasn't fooled. I could feel it, a subtle echo beneath the quiet, a memory pressed into the floorboards and the dust. It wasn't evil, not anymore. It was simply what remained. After a long nightmare residue of sight. The faint hum of something that had once been alive and hungry, and now simply waited to be forgotten. In the study, the desk stood as it always had. My grandfather's journal lay open, though the ink on its last page had faded to nothing. Only a single line remained, burned faintly into the paper. What is seen becomes real. Until no one sees it anymore. I traced my fingers over the words, not sure if I was touching ink or memory. The clock above the fireplace was still ticking. 3:07, the hour. Everything had begun. I turned the hands forward until it matched the true morning light that poured faintly through the curtains. The tick carried on. That small, sound consistent, mechanical was a kind of mercy. Proof that the world still had rhythm, still belonged to time, not to reflection. In the quiet, I spoke aloud. It's over. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. I walked out of the study, down the staircase, past the empty hall, where so many shadows had once moved. The front door, sealed and impossible for so long now, opened easily under my hand. Outside, the morning smelled of pine and damp earth. The forest breathed softly. I stepped out into the world, barefoot on the dew, feeling the sun's warmth on my skin. It felt wrong, only the cold light glide look back. As I crossed the threshold, I caught a final glimpse of my reflection in the brass handle of the door, faint, distorted, nothing more than a blur of light. For a heartbeat, I thought it moved on its own. Then I realized it hadn't. It was just the wind, bending sunlight across the metal. I smiled. For the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I wasn't afraid to close my eyes. The Holly estate stood behind me, quiet and unseeing. The house would decay, the glass would dull, and someday the world would forget the mirrors that had once watched it. That was how it should end. As I walked down the path toward the forest, the last whisper of the old world stirred in the leaves, a voice faint as breath. Remember. But do not look. I paused. Then I whispered back, softly, with the peace of understanding. I won't, and the light swallowed the house whole. Erwin Rose the foreign emir ever. They called me a lunatic for spending $25 million to help old parents sue their children. Maybe they were right. Maybe I lost my mind somewhere between the nursing home visits and the funeral, where my mother's coffin was lowered by strangers because my siblings refused to show up. But madness has a way of looking like justice when the world keeps rewarding cruelty. And if there's anything I've learned in 70 years of life, it's that inheritance brings out the devil in people who once kissed your forehead goodnight. The story didn't start with lawyers and foundations and televised interviews. It started with an apple pie, the last one my mother ever baked. I remember it clearly, the scent of cinnamon and butter wafting through her small kitchen in Maplewood, the gentle clink of her spoon against the glass bowl, and the way her hands trembled as she sliced the apples. Your sister doesn't visit anymore, she said softly, not looking at me. She says she's busy with the kids. There was no bitterness in her voice, just resignation. Like someone who's grown used to being quietly erased from other people's priorities. My mother, Evelyn, was 79 then. Her mind was sharp, her wit still biting, but her body had begun its slow rebellion. Arthritis, high blood pressure, and a stubborn cough that doctors said was nothing serious. My brother, Greg, lived 30 minutes away, but hadn't seen her in 8 months. My sister, Claire, was worse. She'd taken control of the house after convincing Mum to sign over. Power of attorney. Said it was to make things easier. What she didn't mention was that easier meant selling off the backyard to pay for her son's private school. Don't worry, Mom, I told her that day, smiling through my teeth. I'll take care of things. She gave me that knowing look, the one that said she'd already accepted disappointment as a permanent companion. You always say that, Daniel, she whispered. But the world doesn't care about old promises. I didn't argue. Instead, I ate my pie, promised to visit again soon, and left with the smell of cinnamon clinging to my coat. 3 months later, she was gone. Pneumonia, they said. A quiet passing. I wasn't told until 2 days after the funeral. When I confronted Claire, her voice was cold. Efficient! You were always too emotional about things, she said. Mom wanted it simple. We handled it. I hissed. You didn't even call me, because it wasn't about you. Daniel. She was my responsibility. You live across the country. You wouldn't have been able to help. I wanted to hit her. Instead, I walked away. That night, I stood outside the small, freshly packed grave and made a promise. Not to God, not to my family, but to her. I would make sure that people like Claire, like Greg, like every ungrateful, self-serving child who abandons their parents would one day pay for it. For months, I couldn't sleep. Première Stohonzem.